So ladies and gentlemen, I'm trusting that you're doing well today. And yeah, so on today's episode, we are going to look into the evolution of this rift, from Hispanic people being so, they have this rage towards the black people. And sometimes most of the people say that they are trying to fit, they're trying to win the hearts of the white people so that whenever something good is coming out, they're able to benefit. Or rather, maybe it's just maybe how they say things. So we have an amazing lady who is called ｃዓàერთèn, who is trying to explain when she was growing up what she was taught. She was taught by her parents that this, and that should be like this. And that is why, to her own opinion, even when she was growing up, she could meet black kids at the school, and still she had some type of way, because that is not, she's told at home not to mingle, not to have anything, not even get into contact with the black kids. And growing up, she learned better, because right now everybody is asking themselves, we are having like generations to generations, but still the hatred is going on. So this is what she says they were told at home. Listen up.
This and tell us what they be telling y'all at home that make y'all not like us so bad.
So you already know a lot of what my content covers, like racial triangulation, the model minority myth, Asian businesses in black neighborhoods, affirmative action, and so on. As for what I was told in the home behind closed doors when I was growing up, that's not the most fun trip down memory lane, but I always like to be honest about acknowledging anti-blackness among Asian Americans, especially when the call is coming from my own house, so here we go. I first became aware of my mom's anti-blackness when I started kindergarten, and it mostly centered around avoiding interactions with black people and not allowing me to be exposed to anything that she considered black culture. So if we were walking and she saw a black person, she would pull me closer to her. If we were in the car in a parking lot and saw a black person in the parking lot, she would make a point to lock the doors, and I wasn't allowed to listen to rap or Michael Jackson or Tina Turner. And she was hypocritical about that, because I wasn't allowed to listen to Cyndi Lauper or Madonna either. She would call it trash music and say that it was going to be a bad influence. But if it was a white artist, it was not racialized. It was only when it was black artists that it was racialized. And another thing that I think is kind of typical is, as a musician, there were a lot of black artists whom she respected and enjoyed, but she would always say that one black artist is the exception, the rest are bad influences. When I went to school, if I came home and said I made a friend, her first question would be white or black. And that drove me nuts, because in preschool, I dealt with a lot of bullying and discrimination because of being Asian, so it didn't make sense to me that she wanted me to turn around and do that very same thing to my black classmates, whom she knew nothing about, on the basis of their skin color. And when I wouldn't stay away from my black friends, she would resort to making up justifications as to why it was harmful for me. She would say they're going to hurt me and they're going to be a bad influence because they fight and they swear and they're not good students. And of course, none of that was true. And in my household, it was not physically or emotionally safe to voice your opinions, but about that I would, because it literally angered me. And then she would resort to physical violence. And that sealed the deal in my mind that prejudice is purely irrational, because none of her claims had any basis in reality, and that's why she had to resort to physical force. Unfortunately, I think that when parents resort to intimidation and violence to instill prejudice in their children, a lot of times it works. But I was very lucky, because the principal of my elementary school was a black woman who implemented a program called Students Educating Each Other About Discrimination. And that wasn't centered on racial discrimination, it was about discrimination in general. But in that program, we learned to have discussions about discrimination and to identify it and disrupt it. Which at that age just means if you witness discrimination, say it's discrimination and articulate how you know that it's discrimination. So from learning that very powerful tool at school, I was able to identify that what my mom was doing at home was wrong. Additionally, the principal was a black woman, so I had a black woman in a position of leadership as a role model. And in my school district, she wasn't a token. They really valued black leadership, from teachers to administration, guidance counselors, all the way up to superintendents. And so I was surrounded by black role models who made me see that reality did not line up with what my mom was trying to teach me. The straw that broke the camel's back was sometime around the ages of between 7 and 9. I was planning a birthday party, and I told my mom that I want to invite my friend Keisha, which I knew was going to be an issue, but I thought I would try. And she said no, and I said, fine, then I don't want to have a birthday party, and she made me have the birthday party. So now that felt like that's not only cruel to me, but that's cruel to my friend Keisha, whom you don't even know because you refused to meet her. Shortly after that, we were walking in the mall, and my mom did this thing that she often did, which is she sees black people minding their own business, and under her breath, she mumbles a derogatory term in Chinese for black people. And I remember I pulled back on her hand and faced her, and I said, they are not doing anything. You don't know them. The next time you do that, I am going to go up to them, and I'm going to tell them what you said. And believe it or not, the fear of exposure by me actually made her tone it down, and she stopped doing that in public. Fortunately, my mom did not live and die that way. In later years, she came around to seeing and later openly admitting how wrong she was. In her older age, one of her best friends really was black, and my mom admitted to her friend what her previous attitudes had been and why. And from those conversations, I was able to gain some insight as to what my mom's motivation was for her anti-blackness. Because I think most people feel, since Asian Americans also are harmed by white supremacy, how does it make any sense for Asian Americans to be anti-black? My mom spent most of her young life in Hong Kong when it was under British occupation, and then in the 1950s, she came to the United States when she was 16 years old. Generations before my mom, her family had been living in and doing business around Shanghai, Hong Kong, and Macau, which were French, British, and Portuguese occupied areas. So she was heavily indoctrinated into anti-blackness in Hong Kong, where she had no exposure to black people that would have shown her a different reality. And furthermore, what she was indoctrinated into is the idea that an Asian can elevate their status in white spaces by aligning with white supremacy, which includes aligning with anti-blackness. So I think what my mom was doing with me is that from a young age, she saw that I was having a hard time as an Asian American assimilating. So she felt that if I associated with black classmates, that would make assimilating into white spaces even harder. And she was concerned that associating with black classmates would negatively impact my status in white spaces. Well, we all know with me that the outcome was I understand very clearly what spaces I want to be part of and what spaces I don't. So my mom was really proud that she was westernized. She was proud that she spoke English without an accent, that she was very well versed in European culture, and she actually looked down upon my dad for being what she called traditional and therefore backwards. Right, so where was my dad in all of this? My dad grew up in Taiwan, where he had no exposure to black people, but he also had very little exposure to Western media. I think when he came to the United States, he was a bit uncertain around black people because of the lack of familiarity and the slight media bias, but it only took a very little being around black people to see that prejudice is irrational and that it serves a white supremacist agenda that he doesn't want to uphold. As I said before, in my household, it wasn't physically or emotionally safe to voice opinions that differed from my mom, so I do understand why my dad didn't speak up when my mom was being anti-black. He had a hard enough time keeping my brother and I safe. However, what he would do is, when it was just my dad and I, he would make sure to teach me or give me resources about accurate black history. So, for example, a lot of my...
Yeah, so she goes ahead and explains why she grew up knowing that having anything into contact with a black person is a taboo, or rather it's not allowed. And that should not be the question currently, because we are actually living towards like a very huge gap of generations, and people should know better. And up to this age and era, you would find like just a parent, sitting down and trying to tell the kids, or rather trying to be in those social groups and trying to tell you like, this is the reason why we should not be able to mingle with a certain community. And if you're familiar here, or rather if you follow me, I've done a lot of videos concerning the comparison between the black people and the Hispanic people, because to my own opinion, I feel like the culture is more of the same when it comes to food and all that, because most people, whenever they eat African food, whenever they eat the Asian food, they kind of have these comparisons when it comes to how they cook it, when it comes to how they prepare it, even the culture of dressing, music, there's just good vibes between these two communities. So ladies and gentlemen, just in case you're new here, my name is Yvonne, and you are welcome to being part of my online family. Let me know what you think about this issue, what you think about this topic. What are some of the measures, or rather, when we are bringing up the next generation, like, how should it be like? Because it's getting out of hand, and you know how we do it. Until next time.